So I want to have a discussion about Black Panther and The Last Jedi, and I want to compare a couple of things in these films that I think needs to be talked about that I haven't seen anybody talk about anywhere. Now, I haven't seen every video on YouTube or every article I haven't read, obviously, but I haven't seen any of the people who I watch discuss this, and that is how the two films differ as far as how they handled what I guess you can call personal politics. Now, I'm going to be doing a separate video on personal politics in movies because I feel like this is a problem that is getting out of hand. And what I mean by that is, some call it the SJWs, some call it the offended folk, people screaming for representation in movies, minorities or SJWs or LGBT, whatever. I'm going to do a video on my thoughts on it and kind of what's been going on in Hollywood with this sort of change in direction. And both, the good and the bad, because there is good and bad in this, But I'm saving that topic for a separate video altogether. I want to discuss Black Panther versus Last Jedi. One of the things that bugged me about The Last Jedi that I think Ryan Johnson really flubbed up on, in my opinion, was the meta-narrative in the film. I've discussed this before. If you're new to the channel, check out some of my other videos I've done about Last Jedi. They're in the video link in my playlist. Because I've talked about how the film tried too hard to send several messages to the audience, and it became annoying and preachy. And it happened over and over and over again. And after seeing the movie now 4 times, I can tell you that it's definitely something that was done on purpose. In fact, Ryan Johnson admitted that it was kind of meta. Whereas with Ryan Coogler, he took a different approach completely. It's kind of interesting both their names are Ryan. It just hit me. It actually just hit me that both their names are Ryan. That's crazy. But anyways, there's always been politics in movies, right? There always have been forever. I mean, movies have been used as propaganda pieces, and there definitely is political stuff in both Last Jedi and in Black Panther. Now, with The Last Jedi, one of the things that, again, I talked about it before, irritated me was this whole idea that all the men in that movie were incompetent and that really the women were somewhat incompetent in several scenes in the film, but it just made all the characters seem kind of dumber. There was an emphasis on minorities being the good guys and all the villains being white except for Luke Skywalker. You could see this as being done purposely. I mean, this whole diversity thing is being done purposely. And I have nothing against diversity, but when you do diversity just to pander to people, it's kind of pathetic, to be honest with you. There should be diverse characters no matter what. Now, with Black Panther, if you notice the way that they handled sort of the different characters, both directors, both writers did, you can see there's a clear difference here in the way they wanted to do things. Now, we don't really know what the studio's involvement was. We don't know if Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige actually stepped in. Ryan Johnson has talked about collaborations with these people, with Kathleen, and Ryan Coogler probably collaborated with Kevin Feige. So we know there was some influence there. But if you look at how the women, for example, are written in Black Panther, notice that the way Ryan Coogler writes these characters, and really they're based off the Stan Lee characters, is that they're all pretty much equal. There was no point in that movie where I felt that women were better than men or that men were better than women. And I love that about Black Panther. The fact that T'Challa, his sister, his ex-girlfriend, all these different powerful women, especially the scene where they go to Korea. I think it was Korea, right? When they go to Korea, you see T'Challa there with his team, and his team is all women, and I love that. And if you notice, all the women were different in different ways. You have the warrior, you have the strategist, you have the really hyper-intellectual techie sister, and none of the women in this movie, when I'm watching it, felt like they were, trying to get one up on the men. That's not what it felt like, whereas Vice Admiral Holdo was definitely this sort of, and they really kind of made Poe into, oh, I didn't know it was a woman. It's just, you could tell they're doing that. You could tell that they were doing that when you watch the movie. I've seen it enough times to tell you that. And it came off so forced, no pun intended. Whereas with Black Panther, there was none of that. Every character had importance. Then you have the character of Eric Killmonger. Now, I've talked about how Killmonger is my personal favorite Marvel villain. I've talked about this before. He's the best one they've had so far in the MCU. Not Marvel like comics, I mean in the MCU. And I like Kylo Ren, too. I'm not comparing Kylo Ren to Killmonger, but the message that Killmonger was telling us, what I loved that Ryan Coogler did, that Rian Johnson failed to do, was it wasn't the movie that was preaching to you the political ideals of Eric Killmonger. It was Eric Killmonger himself. You know, the struggle in the movie, and by the way, spoilers in case you didn't know, is that Killmonger thinks that Wakanda should use their resources to protect other black people, for lack of a better term, around the world. That was the whole thing, that they've been oppressed and that the technology and their resources in Wakanda could be used to help them, whereas T'Challa is more of a nationalist hero. He's more of a, let's keep everything a secret because we don't want to cause a war, and he is the protector of Wakanda, not the protector of the entire, I guess, ethnicity, for lack of a better term. T'Challa recognizes that if you're to use this technology, there could be a number of negative consequences that could eventually lead to Wakanda being put in danger, and he doesn't want that. Killmonger says the opposite. Killmonger kind of represents the pan-racialism, which is, again, something that was taken from Malcolm X and other people like that, where he thinks, why aren't we doing something? And to me, that's a logical and viable conflict to have with these two characters that are related by blood, because they are cousins. And it's so much more interesting than anything that was in freaking Last Jedi. Because all Last Jedi did was hammer over the head. You know, men are dumb. Don't eat meat. You know, let's free the animals, but not the slave kids. Like, that still bugs me. They freed the animals on Canto Bight, but not the kids. They're still there as slaves. Like, come on. And then there was, of course, the constant message that kept being hammered over the head in Last Jedi about how the old is done and the new is here. Forget about the legend of Luke Skywalker. He had to become the legend. I get the whole story. Like, I get the narrative here. I understand where it is. Rian Johnson's story was he wanted to break down Luke Skywalker and then build him back up again as an actual legend. But the thing is that Luke was already a legend. So at the end of the day, the movie just becomes a big circle jerk. And really at the end of the film, you can tell it is, because Kylo Ren has not really changed, except that he is now higher than Snoke. He's the leader. Rey hasn't changed too much. Leia, Poe, where's the actual arc for these characters? Even Finn, who was going to do something noble, got stopped by freaking Kelly Marie Tran's character, Rose Tico. Like, oh, it was just bad. Whereas in Black Panther, they didn't have to tell you, hey, this is a black movie. Hey, there's black actors. Hey, we're in Wakanda. Hey, look at this, look at that. It's almost like Rian Johnson treated its audience that they're a bunch of dumb kids, whereas Black Panther, Ryan Coogler, the director of that film, just told a story. He told a story. There were messages in his story, but it didn't supersede the story. And it's all about telling a good story. That's the main thing. And everything else should be secondary, in my opinion. So the question is, how was Ryan Coogler able to make such a great movie where he was able to make both the male and female characters important? Because they were both, every character in this movie, no matter what side they're on, the good or the bad, are important, including Ulysses Claw, who is not black. You know, and I like that. He was able to make every character important despite their race or their ethnicity or their gender. None of that mattered in the grand scheme of the story because it took place mostly in Wakanda, and so you're going to have that culture naturally built in. Star Wars has tons of culture. I mean, just go back and watch the original trilogy or even the prequels. You're going to see planets that have their own kind of unique look to them, and whether or not you like the prequels or not, George Lucas did build on a lot of the lore. And one of the things I did like about the Canto Bight scene in episode 8 was that it did sort of expand the universe out and show that there are scoundrels all over the place. I did like that. The scene itself, I think, was too long and too boring, you know, on Canto Bight, but the idea behind the planet I thought was a great idea. More of that would have been fine as far as like telling us more about the galaxy. But with Black Panther, and there are similarities in the two films, you know, it didn't need to be hammered over your head. Like, hey, we have strong women. They didn't once even refer to, even jokingly about, you know, Nakia being a woman. None of that stuff. Oh, the girl. We didn't see any of that in this movie because it doesn't matter. And also what I like, too, is that it doesn't matter what their sexual orientation was because that wasn't a part of the storyline. See what I'm saying? The storyline was a conflict, a pseudo-political conflict, and a physical one between Killmonger and T'Challa because Killmonger feels like he is owed the country of Wakanda, and T'Challa says otherwise. And the important thing is, like I said, the story. It's a great story. That's the most important thing. What makes a great movie is a great story. The movie did not hammer over your head that eating meat is wrong and, women are equal to men and, you're just a man. You don't know what you're talking about. Bumbling idiots as, the villains. Wispy, twirly mustache Snoke before he died. That's not what Black Panther did. Black Panther just told you a solid story with cool characters to where at the end of the movie, you kind of feel bad for Killmonger. You kind of feel bad for him. You kind of agree with some of the things he said. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything, but you kind of see his point. And that's what makes a great movie because guess what, folks? In my opinion, now both of these guys have talent, okay? I am never, ever going to sit here and tell you that Rian Johnson is not a talented filmmaker because I'd be lying to you. He is a talented filmmaker. He's done some great movies. Ryan Coogler is the same. They're both young guys. They're both students of the game. I think Coogler is a better filmmaker than Rian Johnson. That's the way it stands right now. Now, when Ryan does his trilogy, he might do something very unique and creative that I like, something different. But as it stands, when you compare these two films, I feel that Ryan Coogler knocked it out of the park better than Last Jedi did. Even if you like Last Jedi, watch Black Panther and note the differences. It's very interesting. Also, did you ever notice how Black Panther, the final sequence was kind of like a somewhat of a loose remake of Phantom Menace? You have the battle like in between the train, which is kind of like the force fields when the Jedi were fighting in Phantom Menace. Then you have the battle on the outside in the fields, like the Gungan fight. Then you have the whole wacky space stuff, which was with Bilbo Baggins there, Martin Freeman doing his character, Ross, and then you've got, like, the ships and whatnot. So, there you go. I mean, it's just funny how it seems like there was some influence there of having those things going on at once, and it was pretty cool the way it was done. But I love Black Panther. Let me know what you think in the comments about these two directors and comparing the films. Is it fair to compare them? I think... yeah, I mean, what more can I tell you, all right, except for that's what I think. So I'll talk to y'all soon, and hope you enjoyed the video and the discussion.